Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. A couple nights ago, I had a chance to be a guest at the Republican dinner and had a chance to hear Governor Corbett speak. I've known Governor Corbett for a long time. In fact, I kidded him. I said I met him for the first time. He was running for Attorney General at the York Fair, and I think Stan Saylor introduced him to me and met him then. And he's with us here this morning on the Gary Sutton Show to talk specifically about the election day. Good morning, Governor. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Gary. How are you doing?
Doing very well. I got a question to ask you. I'm going to ask you a question. Maybe you've been asked this, and I don't want you to be prickly about it, but I'm going to ask you this question anyway. If you did a good job and did what you said you'd do over the last 4 years, and I've heard a lot of pundits say over the last few days, you can say what you want about Governor Corbett, but he said what he's going to do, and then he did it over the last 4 years. Why are you even in a race right now? I mean, why aren't people seeing and appreciating what you did? Why is Tom Wolf even running?
Well, that's easy to answer. And I talked about it back when I was running 4 years ago. I said, we're in a very difficult situation with a $4.2 billion deficit. And the next governor, which was me, is going to have to make some very tough decisions that some people aren't going to find very popular. But it's absolutely necessary, and that's what the voters of Pennsylvania elected me to do. And, I understand and always understood that as we get through the entire 4 years, hoping to get our message out, you see what we have done. And it's getting the message out hasn't been the easiest thing because people were upset, particularly with not having as much money for education because of the cut that took place beforehand.
Yeah, you remember you and I had a pretty hard conversation here the one day, I think, about the money that was going out of education, and we were talking about charter schools and everything else. So, yeah, I remember the time well. But go ahead.
But I can tell you, I'm out here in Pittsburgh today, and I was down in a section of Pittsburgh that's extremely Democratic, and people along the street are coming up to me saying, Governor, you did what you said you were going to do. I voted for you last time. I'm voting for you again this time. And there are a lot of people out there. They're not getting called in the polls, but I continue to hear that everywhere I go, particularly among seniors that understand that tough decisions have to be made. People are always saying they want a politician to go there and keep their promises. Well, I've kept my promise, and nobody can complain about that. But really, the issue for this race is, and the one that we're trying to drive home is, I try and keep the taxes of Pennsylvanians down. Mr. Wolf is promising to raise taxes. He's just not going to tell you how much he's going to raise them.
Well, I thought the other night you laid out something that was interesting to me, and I sat there and just tried to kind of absorb what different people were saying. But I think you brought up the idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, something like $5.2 billion that he needs to put back into the coffers here in order to make up for the things that he says you didn't do. For example, taking away the $1 billion from education, and we've heard that story about, the one-time stimulus, and you even said in the beginning right there, I can remember very well because you were on the show saying it, don't put that in your budget because it's not going to be there. It's a one-and-done kind of thing, and people still went ahead and did that in a lot of places. So, point being, how do you take that money and put it back in? And that question has not yet been answered. And I just talked about that a moment ago. I said that's something that I think we are owed. If you say someone took money out and you're going to replace that, how are you going to put it back in?
Well, but keep in mind, what disappeared was federal money.
Yes. That
Governor Rendell put into the operating budget of Pennsylvania, sent to the school districts, told them not to do that, which is kind of like do as I say, not as I do. Told them not to do it, and the school districts, 70+% of the school districts, did exactly what he did. Now, to replace that, you have two choices. Ask the federal government to give it back to you, which they're not going to do because they told you it was one-time money, or make up that difference, raising the taxes on the people of Pennsylvania. We looked at it, and we said, we're not going to do either. We're not going to get money from the federal government. That money's gone. We will grow the budget back as the economy grows, and that's what has happened. And today we spend more money from the state on K-12 education than any time in the history of Pennsylvania, even including when we had federal money in there in the Rendell administration.
When you look at the last 4 years, one of the things that you hear people say all the time is we wanted pension reform. You put a pension reform plan out there. I know there's other ones that you have supported that have been put out there through the state assembly, and yet you have people who continue to fight you on that in your own party, particularly down near Philadelphia, where you get an awful lot of union pressure, as you're well aware. How people are going to say, if that's one of the things that I'm sure you want to get at here in the next term, you talked about calling a special session, and some people say, well, that could have been done earlier. What are you going to do? I mean, how do you express leadership to get these people together to say this is a crisis? Your opponent has come up short of saying it's a crisis right now. You're saying it's a crisis. What will you do to get people to come to the table on that and finally enact some kind of good legislation?
Well, first off, Gary, let me just correct one thing you said. I didn't campaign on the pension. I said we know there's a problem there, but I never campaigned on it. And we had to get through the first 2 years of recovering from a $4.2 billion. It wasn't until the last 2 years. And what we've run up against is an absolute refusal from the entire Democratic Party, both the House and the Senate, from doing anything on pensions. And they say that Act 120 fixed it. It didn't fix it. It kicked the can down the road, but it increased the payments that the school districts and the state have to put into the pensions for the teachers. And then we also have it for the state employees. That's what's causing property taxes to go up. And then, as you know, Gary, for the month of July and August of this year, I went across the state talking to people about the issue of their property taxes because of pensions. We are starting to get a groundswell, and we do have more legislators taking a look at this. Unfortunately, keep in mind that we had state senators from southeastern Pennsylvania that were running for re-election and still are running for re-election this year. Now, next year, they won't be running for re-election again for 4 years. So I'm going to come back with a special session, make all the legislature, including the Democrats. I want to see the Democrats continue to say, we don't need to fix it. Everybody knows we need to fix it. The local municipalities want to have theirs fixed, and we ought to be taking a look at that at the same time. And we can't be kicking the can down the road to the next generation. So we will build that groundswell, and the special session, doing that is going to give us a little more oomph, as I call it, to get the legislature to make the tough decisions. You know, I made tough decisions, and that's one of the reasons that people are upset at me. But we are going to grow the economy. We have been growing it by focusing on it early on in the first year of a General Assembly. And for those senators who aren't running again for 4 years, we have to get something done. The option for the people of Pennsylvania, and many of them know that we have to do this, the option is not an option. It's Tom Wolf. And Tom Wolf has said, well, we don't really have a crisis. We have a little problem, but we need to let Act 120 continue as it is. That's not good for the people of Pennsylvania, and they know it. Well, he's not going to deal with it.
In one of your debates, he came up short of saying it was a crisis. I was listening very carefully to both of you. But we have to take care of our responsibilities to pensions. And I'm saying it's unsustainable. You can't do that. Anybody out here that's doing the math knows that. So what are you going to do? It's nice to say that, but what about the people who are having to pay the taxes in the growing school district budgets, in the growing municipal budgets that have to keep on doing that and say, we have a ceiling too, where we're going to have to stop paying taxes because we can't afford this anymore?
Well, Gary, and this is where he's disingenuous. He knows that those defined benefit plans are unsustainable.
Yes.
His company went from a defined benefit to a defined contribution plan.
Right, exactly.
He took advantage of that. But when it comes to the taxpayers, he thinks the taxpayers should continue to pay the pensions for a long time down the road. Now, taxpayers are still going to, even if we go to a defined contribution plan for new employees, because we do have an obligation for the existing employees and for the retirees.
No question about
it. But what you said, you used the word unsustainable for the future. It absolutely is unsustainable. But it goes back to the major flaw in his campaign, and that's he won't tell you what he's going to do. He refuses to answer questions when it comes to how much he's going to tax you. He refuses to answer questions and show his books on the incorporation of his company in Delaware. He demonstrates that he doesn't necessarily believe in Pennsylvania companies when he ends his relationship with a local vendor for building his kitchen cabinets and hires a vendor from Indiana. What kind of cheerleader for Pennsylvania products is that who wants to be the governor?
You know, again, I don't even have a problem with that as much as I do with this. One of the things that, and again, we saw you as Attorney General. We saw your body of work that you gave us as governor. I want you to list some of those things in just a moment here. But one of the things that when someone comes up, and Terry Madonna and I were talking about that the other day, and you know Terry very well, and I said there's two compartments here. The one compartment says, okay, I want to win an election. I understand that. And I'm trying to get Tom Wolf on right now to give equal time that I'm giving you today. And I can't even get a response back from his campaign. And I actually know Tom a little bit. He's from the same two towns. It was in Manchester. He was in Mount Wolf. And thought that would be a no-brainer right here in our area. But I can't get them on. Now, if I were to get them on, I would ask this question. Everybody saw what he did with the Wolf Company here and turning that around. Great stuff. But I'd like to know, what was it that you did specifically that we can learn from that you would now apply as principles in governing as governor here in the state of Pennsylvania? I think that's as reasonable a question as you can ask anyone, just like we ask you, what did you do in the last 4 years, and what would you do differently in the next 4 years? What things have you learned by? Those are reasonable questions we should be able to ask both of you, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he has a reticence to answer the questions of the people in Pennsylvania and the media as you have, and that should give the voter great pause considering him when he won't answer basic questions like, you're going to tax me more, how much is it going to be?
Right. And you don't have to give me every specific number, but I want to see a process by which you are going to work those problems. Okay. And they're going to make sense to me. As we're sitting out here, for example, the pension right now doesn't make sense. We can't keep paying in a defined benefit plan there because we know that economic things change. And so, that's just common sense. Now, if you tell me that's not a crisis, then I got to say, well, then what the heck is it? You're trying to deal with that. I wish it would have been dealt with before, the budget came up here this year. People are commissioned out. I think you probably understand that. We want to see some real action. So let me ask you this question. What would you have done differently that you did in the last 4 years? What things do you ever just kind of, because we all have to go back. I'm an old coach. We all have to go back and we kick ourselves and we say, you know what, I wish I'd have done that differently. I wish I'd had better relations with the Senate and the House or whatever it might have been. What would you say what would be for you?
Well, I would say we needed to communicate better. Both internally and externally to the people. Having been a prosecutor and an attorney general, we always kept things close to the vest until we were ready to announce it. Make sure we had, our I's dotted, our T's crossed, and ready to go. Because the one thing that happens if you start telling somebody something, you can't keep something secret when you think it needs to be kept secret, and it gets out ahead of you. Maybe we should have let it get out ahead of us. Maybe we should have gotten out ahead of it a little bit faster than we did. And from a political standpoint, the public sector unions, the teacher union leadership has taken those dollars that their teachers have taken out of their pay on a regular basis, put it over into a political action committee, and spent $4 million in campaign advertising against me over the last 4 years.
Right.
Maybe there we should have raised money in our campaign and spent campaign dollars back in the very first year to counter what is truly the great lie.
The one thing that Tom Wolf has done is he is one of the few guys in the country who's invited President Obama to come in and speak for him in Philadelphia, of all places, obviously. To me, the president has said that his policies are a referendum for people to vote on, and he said it several times, including this last weekend. And yet at the same time, I haven't heard enough about that. To me, President Obama got by on generalities getting elected. He had a much worse resume, I think, than Tom Wolf did. But by the same token, we let that happen. And it seems to me that the idea of letting generalities parade as specifics, and we see too much of that in politics today, is something we ought not let happen again.
Absolutely. Well, the people know where I am. I've made the tough decisions, both as Attorney General, and that's why I got elected governor, and now as governor. I did not back away from making tough decisions. I think people want you to make those tough decisions. And they know my track record. They really don't know where Mr. Wolf is on many of the issues other than generalities. But you bring up a very good point. He fully supports the president's policies, including Obamacare. He actually said in one interview that he didn't think Obamacare went far enough.
Yeah.
And this election is a referendum across the state on the Obama policies, because Tom Wolf wants to continue the Obama policies, not just for the next 2 years, but going in to the 2 years after that. I don't think the people of Pennsylvania want that. I'm glad he's bringing the president in to Philadelphia. It indicates to me that they're worried about turnout, and they're going to try and get turnout out in Philadelphia. But it's going to allow the rest of the state to see that as Michelle Obama said, that they need to elect Tom Wolf in order to continue the policies of Barack Obama. The people of Pennsylvania now have a clear reason and distinction to vote. One, because of what I've been saying, he wants to tax you, but he won't tell you how much. And two, he wants to extend the policies of Barack Obama, which I think are very unpopular across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Governor, I'm going to say something to you, and I've never done this on my show before in 17 years. I don't endorse, but I would vote for you today. Because I know what your record is. I know where you stand. I haven't agreed with everything. You and I have argued a little bit over some educational things from time to time. I don't expect that I would agree with any governor on everything. But I know where your body of work is. I can see the numbers. I feel like it is important for us to know the other alternatives. And I don't feel like we've been given those right now. And based on that alone, I would vote for you today for governor of Pennsylvania for 4 more years, hoping full well that you've learned lessons over this last 4 years, and that you're going to apply those in terms of some of the really big things that people have talked to death for a long time, like pension and tax reform, and can walk away at the end of the next 4 years and say you've gotten them done. Until I hear a specific alternative plan, I think that's where I would stand today. I'm not telling other people to vote for you. I'm saying this is where I am today.
Well, Gary, I appreciate that, and you make a very good point. I today understand and know the office of governor much better than 4 years ago when I was running for it. I believe I'm more qualified to do it now than I was then, and I know I'm more qualified than Mr. Wolf is, particularly because he won't communicate with the people of Pennsylvania as to what he's going to do in his plans, and that should frighten everybody.
And that's the one thing I would say to you and admonish you over the next 4 years. If you are to win, please communicate with us on everything that you do. And, I think it would serve you very, very well, just as I would tell Mr. Wolf the same thing if he were on here, too. That's the only scolding I'll do today. How's that, Governor?
That sounds good.
All right. Hey, thank you so much for taking time with us this morning. We appreciate you being open with us, and good luck with the campaign.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you very much. Governor Tom Corbett with us here on the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. We'll be right back right after this.